We are all exposed to some radiation, for instance from the sun's rays or from radon gas emitted when uranium in the ground decays. Starting with the invention of medical X-rays more than a century ago, we also have been exposed to man-made sources. Atomic bomb blasts and nuclear reactor accidents such as those at the Chernobyl and Fukushima Daiichi power plants have been major concerns.
So there's no avoiding exposure to radiation. It's part of living on the Earth. And we get it from all kinds of sources. We get it from the sun, cosmic rays. We get it from the food we eat. It comes out of the ground. Lots of industrial, medical, scientific uses. It goes from very low doses that we breathe and there's nothing to do about it, to really high and extreme doses like we're hearing about inside the nuclear reactor accident in Japan.
We now know there's a hot spot. It's about 30 kilometers northwest of the site. And so they will eventually probably get a kidney-shaped exclusionary to keep people out.
People are now living in shelters. They ran from the areas that have been exposed to radiation. They don't have their belongings with them, especially important documents, and yet they're not allowed to go back to the area to pick them up. So they feel helpless and hopeless.
Even though there are hundreds of different radionuclides, the abundance are really a handful. Iodine, which is liquid, almost a gas at room temperature, if it gets hot at all, and if the fuel elements fail in any way, you can have iodine coming out. As the temperature gets warmer, you will start volatilizing the cesium. Now cesium has several hundred-degree boiling point, but it gets very hot, so it comes out and it condenses immediately into very fine particles. If it gets even hotter, we'll start seeing strontium. And we haven't seen that. I don't think the temperature has gotten up to that point. And even hotter than that, then some of the actinides, the plutonium, will start coming out.
As a result of multiple studies that have been done in the past 25 years, we now know that exposure to radioactive iodines, radioactive cesium and strontium after the Chernobyl has been linked to increases in the risk of thyroid cancer and other thyroid diseases among those who are exposed as children. We have also seen the increase in leukemia among cleanup workers who were exposed to gamma radiation. We also found out that risk does not decrease in time, and those who were youngest at the time of the accident, especially children under the age of 5, were at highest risk of developing thyroid cancer many years after the accident.
The government is producing numbers, millisieverts, microsieverts, etc. And the numbers do not make sense to a lot of people. And so when they hear the numbers, they basically turn off their ears and they're not listening. What they are listening are things like contaminated products that have been taken off the market, that people are not purchasing. People in other prefectures are avoiding food that have been raised in the area, not only close to the power plant, but in the entire prefecture. Unlike the earthquake and the tsunami, there has been no end. People are now wanting to know what's going to happen tomorrow, a week from now, a year from now, and that's still very unclear, and that's been problematic for people. People want to be sure about their future, and they cannot at this moment.
Many were fearful too in the United States, where exposure to radiation blown over from Japan was comparatively quite small.
Once we get as far away as California, we can actually measure the radiation, but those doses are in the trivial range. Just because we can measure them doesn't mean we need to be concerned about them. The doses in California from what's going on in Japan are truly trivial.
We've been busy measuring iodine and cesium in various foodstuffs, and occasionally found something. It hasn't been real high, but we like putting that data out there because it's my feeling that the way through this, as individuals and as a public, is total transparency.
We can measure radioactivity at levels that are unbelievably low. We can count single atoms in a liter of water, but we cannot measure health effects anywhere near those levels.
We're exposed to radiation from lots of sources, microwaves, cell phones. These are different waves. They don't have the capacity to alter chemical bonds, to change DNA, and ionizing radiation by definition does. But we have a lot of damage that we repair naturally and spontaneously all the time. So yes, in some ways there's no safe level that can be demonstrated, but there's no reason to think there's extraordinarily low levels or particularly harmful either, or they're not any more harmful than just walking down the street.
But even in the absence of nuclear accidents, average radiation exposures in the United States have been increasing. This is due primarily to the growing popularity of CT imaging, a powerful tool for detecting cancer and other medical conditions.
Among survivors of the atomic bomb, they're at increased risk of getting cancer over the rest of their life, and increased risk of getting pretty much any kind of cancer you can think of. So leukemia, we think of as the highest risk, but they continue to get other cancers. The survivors of the atomic bombs had a median dose of 40 millisieverts, and a single CT scan can give you that same exposure. The risk of a typical CT scan, I think, is probably in the ballpark of about 1 in 200, 1 in 300 for a 20-year-old patient. The numbers go down dramatically with age, maybe 1 in 500 for a 40-year-old patient, 1 in 1,000 for a 50-year-old patient. And that means that if you have 1,000 patients who undergo CT, one of them might be expected to get cancer from that test. I think patients being informed about the fact that imaging comes with this important side effect is good information for them to have. So then ask their doctors, do I need this test? Is it going to help me? And if your doctor says, yes, it's going to help you, then almost certainly it will. But often the doctor will say, well, let me think about that. Maybe we can wait to image you. Did you have this test already? Is there another test we can use that doesn't have a side effect? And I think that level of conversation needs to happen.